Unit 1 Logic of Inquiry in Social Research. Contents 1.1 Introduction, 1.2 A Science of Society, 1.3 Comte's idea on the nature of sociology, 1.4 Observation in social sciences, 1.5 Logical understanding of social reality, 1.6 Conclusion. Learning objectives. It is expected that after reading the Unit 1, you will be able to discuss the following themes pertaining to the debate over science, the importance of scientific method, the nature of sociology as a science of society. 1.1 Introduction. This is the first unit of Book 1 on research methodologies. In the style of a narrative, the unit begins with a discussion about the nature of sociology as a science of society and looks at science as a way to understand the world around us. The earliest mention of a scientific approach to understanding the nature of the social world along the lines of understanding the natural world is found in the works of Auguste Comte in 1798 to 1857. From Comte's ideas, the discussion proceeds to observation in and methods of the social sciences. A scientific observation is capable of being turned into a higher level generalization or to build a theory. Unit 3 has a detailed discussion of theory building. Unit 2 will go into greater details about how one goes about collecting empirical data in the social sciences and what constitutes empirical approach to understanding the social reality. Let us now begin the debate over science in the social sciences. 1.2 A Science of Society. Social science research can be understood against the backdrop of a history of evolution of human thought. To begin with, it is necessary to understand that the philosophical foundations of the science of sociology began in the West with its roots in Europe or in the early Greek philosophies. Aristotle was the first logician who gave primacy to the faculty of reasoning of the human mind above what is handed down to us by tradition or custom. We are not trying to claim for our discipline lineage from Plato or Confucius, from the Mahabharata and the Code of Hammurabi. Rather, we are looking into the logic of social inquiry and hence the reference to Aristotle. Research methodologies. Box 1.1 Aristotle. A student of Plato and the tutor of Alexander the Great, Aristotle lived around 300 BC. He put forward most elementary form of a logical inquiry, namely a major premise, a minor premise, a major premise, a minor premise, and a conclusion. If the first two were correct or based on facts, the conclusion would be correct too. For example, we have a major premise that all humans are mortal and a minor premise that Hari is a human. Then the conclusion would be that Hari is mortal. This form of reasoning is known as Aristotle's theory of syllogism or deductive reasoning as opposed to inductive reasoning. In the history of Western thought, Aristotle's logic dominated until 1600 AD and was also passed on to the Arabic and Latin medieval traditions. After about 2000 years, Galileo Galilei in Italy, Francis Bacon in England, and Tycho Brahe in Denmark and others found that without any logical errors, Aristotle's deductive method of reasoning did not correspond to scientific inquiry about nature. As a result, the followers of the new scientific method known as inductive method of reasoning turned deductive method upside down. However, for a long historical time, the advocates of logic had to fight with the domination of religions to establish the supremacy of human reason and mind over the supernatural domain or the will of God. Till almost the 18th century, it proved to be a losing battle, at least in the West. It was with the Renaissance, a movement of or period of vigorous artistic and intellectual activity beginning in 14th century Italy lasting into the 17th century. That finally it was accepted that society is not a creation of God governed by a divine will, but a creation of human beings and an entity that has an objective and changing existence that can be studied from the outside. The progressive evolution of societies. Box number 1.2, the progressive evolution of societies. The historians and philosophers of the late 17th and 18th centuries, such as Voltaire, Montesquieu, Hume, etc., projected certain basic premises regarding the truth of social existence. These were in the form of a universal history, holding a basic supposition that all societies are evolved and have gone through various transformations to be what they are today. An idea of progress, that things are going towards better and the triumph of reason is the ultimate goal of humankind. A science of society became possible when it was clearly understood and accepted by most that society is a creation of human and not of God. The extent to which we can view sociology as a scientific discipline, a guiding principle of science, is that what we can derive valid knowledge from the strict rules of evidence which are reliable and valid. In this sense, science encompasses, along with other disciplines, the discipline of sociology. By examining the relationship between sociology and scientific methodology that is followed by the natural sciences, we can understand if sociology is scientific in the same way as a natural science is. It is also possible to find out if sociology can be scientific even when it does not follow the methodology and methods of natural sciences. For this purpose, we need to examine various methodologies followed by sociologists in their work and then appreciate the claim of calling sociology a scientific discipline. All of us attach a special status to the notion of scientific knowledge because it depicts the world as it is rather than as any one of us may wish it to be. In this sense, scientific knowledge provides us the possibility of gaining a true understanding of the nature of social and natural world. This understanding is not based on opinion or unproven faith and superstition. You can find the earliest development of such understanding of sociology in the work of Auguste Comte. It is not accident that Auguste Comte is known as the founder of sociology. If you look at the development in sociological methodology, the word sociology obtained from the work of Auguste Comte. In order to appreciate sociology as a science of society, it is a useful exercise to outline Comte's ideas on the nature of sociology. This will give us an insight into the kind of scientific approach early sociologists followed. This approach can give an impetus to sociology to gradually develop into a reflexive science. 1.3 Comte's ideas on the nature of sociology. Written in the 19th century, Comte's work reflects his engagement with the methodology of scientific thought. He argued that, like scientists who studied the natural world and discovered the nature of laws determining the behavior of matter in physical world, it was possible to discover the laws which determine the behavior of people in social world. In his book Course of Positive Philosophy, published in 1839 to 1842, Comte made point that laws governing the behavior of people in the social world would be discovered through the development of a positive philosophy of human social development. In other words, Comte was saying that social scientists could use the methodology and insight of the natural sciences as the model for development of social physics or sociology. He gave the idea of positivism as given in box 1.3. Box 1.3, Comte's idea of positivism. In the positive state, the mind has given over the vain research after the absolute notions, the origin and the destination of the universe and the causes of phenomena, applies itself to the study of their laws, their invariable relations of succession and resemblance. Reasoning and observation duly combined are the means to this knowledge. What we now understand when we speak of an explanation of facts is simply established of connections between the single phenomena and some general facts, the number of which diminishes with the progress of science. We can say that in Comte's eyes, the aim of science was not to explain why things came into existence or the cause of their beings. He held that the aim of science was the explanation of how things related to one another in terms of variable and universal laws. In this sense, observable phenomena are the main ingredients of positive science, which aims to establish law-like relations between phenomena through gathering factual knowledge. Gathering of factual knowledge is carried out through observation, experimentation, comparison, and prediction. The idea is that after discovering a wide range of laws, it would be possible to explain the laws in terms of their relationship to each other. Positivism of Comte espoused that science means the progressive discovery of laws and their interrelationships, so that science could one day propound a general law from which all other laws emanate. The Comte assumed that the social world was a regular and an objective, as was the natural world. For him, social laws governed the social world just as natural laws governed the natural world. Comte thus considered the methodology of the natural sciences the ideal way to discover the laws governing the social world, and he advocated the development of new positive outlook based on the methodology of natural sciences. According to Comte, the main task of sociology was to discover the general laws of social development, and he divided the general laws into following categories: laws of coexistence or social static. These laws govern the relationship between different parts of society. As such, they determine the functions and the interrelationship between the various parts. Laws of success or social dynamics. These laws govern social change and record an exploration of the way the nature and function of social institutions changed over time. We may describe the above as Comte's positivism. Since there are various types of positivism, it is essential to understand the basic argument of scientific inquiry or inherent methodologies of Comte's positivism. As you know, Comte followed the methodology of 19th century natural sciences for posting the principle of natural sciences to the study of human social development. Auguste Comte made in the process some assumptions and observations about social development. His assumptions and observations are according to the science of the 19th century. Comte's first assumption was that societies pass through a process of evolutions, and these stages of development are from the simple to the complex. In this sense, societies gradually become more complex and institutionally differentiated, performing specific functions. Next, Comte questions that if there are incremental differences in societies, what makes them not disintegrate? According to Comte, mechanisms leading to a social integration need to evolve one or the other form of mutual dependence. From the above two assumptions, Comte derived that devolution is both a natural and demonstrable fact, and it is governed by laws of development. Comte argued that the task of sociology was to discover the laws of development by one, systematic observation, two, a collection of data or facts, and third, development of theories to explain the facts. The logic of Comte's idea is called inductivism. See box 1.4, distinction between inductive and deductive form of logic. Box 1.4, distinction between inductive and deductive forms of logic. The deductive method takes a few axioms or so-called true statements with the aim of providing other true statements or theorems which logically emanate from them. The inductive method, on the other hand, makes many observations about nature with the aim of discovering a few but strong statements about how nature works, or about what are the laws of and theories that are at the back of how nature appears to us. In the deductive method, logic is the main operating tool. If a statement emanates logically from the axioms, it must be true. In the inductive method, often called the scientific method, Observations of nature is main operating tool. If an idea is in conflict with what occurs in nature, the idea has to be given up as useless. Adherents of traditional logic, who were the descendants of Aristotelian logic, became rivals of those following the new inductive method of natural sciences with different notions of reasoning or logic. You may be interested in knowing that although science is inductive by definition, in the sense of that observations are the only valid evidence of truth, the process of science can be deductive. Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, updated on August 23, 2004, on Aristotle's logic mentions that more recent scholarship has applied the very techniques of mathematical logic to Aristotle's theories, revealing, in the opinion of many, a number of similarities of approach and interest between Aristotle and modern logicians. We can also call Comte's logics as inductive positivism. This is also referred to as the 19th century positivism. Positivism as a methodology developed in the 20th century was quite different from what we have just learned. You would learn more about positivism in later units of this book. Based on the reasoning of his inductive positivism, Comte gave three stages of evolution of human society, namely the age of religions, the age of metaphysics, and the age of reason. This was a position counter to the one professed by the church, that society in its most perfect form existed at the beginning of creation, and that humankind is going towards degenerations, and more importantly the division of the world into Christians and to non-Christians, to be equated with the savages and non-humans. In the following reflections and action exercise, we are going to critically look at the methodological approach problems inherent in the inductive positivism. Reflection and action 1.1. We will work out the basics of Comte's notions that it is possible to discover social laws in the same manner as scientists discover natural laws, and then debate over the scientific approach of the 19th century sociology through the case of Comte's ideas. This exercise has 4 parts. Complete the first 2 parts, A and B, now and then last 2 parts, C and D, in reflection and action 1.2. A. Answer the following questions and bring out Comte's assumptions about human development, and write down the answers to the questions given below on a separate sheet of paper. Questions. Does Comte answer the question of why do the laws of development governing the social world exist? Does he avoid answering this question? What is the implication of avoiding this question? Does Comte simply assume that the social development is evolutionary, or does he offers any evidence to prove this position? Is Comte assuming that the social world has a rational order which is over and above the capacity of human consciousness to change it? Does he assumes that the universe has some form of natural order that as sociologists we need to discover? B. Based on your answers, work out if the 19th century sociology that relied heavily on data, facts collection and theorizing at the most abstract level as an evidence in Comte's writing was a victim of logical forms of methodological error inherent in inductive positivism. For this exercise, you would need to answer the following questions. Do you think that the facts are self-evident things? Is it not the case then that what I consider as a fact, you may interpret it to be something else? Don't or does not Comte's positivism tell us how to identify a fact in the first place? How are we to arrive at a common understanding of what is or is not a fact? Do the answers to the above questions imply that if facts have to be interpreted and not simply discovered to be facts, it is obvious that we tend to make a subjective judgment? Would you say that this is then not an objective method of scientific inquiry? Would you also say that it is not possible to theorize or on the basis of such a non-scientific method or of inquiry? The issue coming out of the above exercise is as to how one identifies a social fact and how it is the same or different from a natural fact. The comparison of social science with natural science poses a clear problem. For while in the natural science the objects of study have a definite material existence, in the social science only human beings and their manifest behavior is the material, but observation of behavior from the outside yield very little knowledge about the explanation of behavior. The existence of a rationally deductive objective reality is philosophically linked to what is known as the notion of duality, exemplified in the philosophical notions of Descartes, best known as Cartesian duality. Box 1.5. René Descartes. Born on March 31st, 1596 in Touraine, France, René Descartes was one of the most significant and influential thinkers in human history. He was also an outstanding mathematician. Cartesian duality presupposes the division between the other objective realities of the phenomena and the inner subjectivity of the observer. The premise is that for a scientific observation, the two must remain separate, and that the objective world has a rational reality that is akin to the mathematical truth. Together with Spinoza and Leibniz, he informed a part of what is known as the rationalist school. Let us now complete the reflection and the action 1.2 that contains the other two parts of the earlier exercise. You need not worry about the right or wrong answers to the questions. The idea of completing the exercise is to reflect and develop the skill of arriving at an understanding of how we employ logic to understand and know, and on what basis. Reflection and action 1.2. C. If facts are the basis of theories, that is, if we develop theories to explain the relationship between facts, then as scientists we do not have any reasonable basis to make a distinction between good and bad or true or false theories. This is so because our theories are based on a collection of facts, and we identify facts according to our subjective judgment about what is a fact. The whole process then is not conducive to production of valid knowledge that have been derived on the basis of irrefutable facts. You can illustrate this idea by considering the following statement. It is a fact that men are socially superior to women. Questions. On what evidence would you base your judgment that this is or is not the case? Are you able to explain this fact in another manner? If yes, how? Suggest how it is possible to make a distinction between different interpretations of the facts. D. On the basis of the exercise you have just carried out, answer the following questions. If a sociologist agrees with the fact stated above, what sort of theory would she or he develop to explain the relationship between superior social status and gender? If a sociologist does not agree with the fact stated above, what sort of theory would she or he develop to explain the relationship between superior social status and gender? How can we show that the theory developed in the first is more or less valid than the one developed in the second? The art of observation itself became a central methodological issue of social sciences, especially for those who had as their objective the study of society as against the study of individuals, as in psychology. The school of philosophers known as the empiricists gave primary to empirical fact as against the logical knowledge of the rationalist. Some of the philosophers of the empiricist knowledge are John Locke, George Berkeley, and David Hume. The tussle for primacy between empiricism and logic is resolved in the social sciences by the need for both to come into conclusion regarding social reality. The two ways of understanding social reality are known as inductive and the deductive methods. By knowing, most social scientists agree that the process of inductive and deductive reasoning runs simultaneously as one attempts to make sense of what is observed empirically. One has to rely on logic for interpretations, and again, logic cannot be applied in vacuum. It needs some kind of solid referendum. Even in the imagination has its limits and cannot be beyond the frontiers of human comprehension. That is ultimately linked to what can be humanly observed. Let us discuss the fact of observation as practiced in social sciences. 1.4 Observation in social sciences. It is clear that unlike the observation conducted in the natural sciences that depend only on the senses of the observer, the observation in social sciences need the participation of the observed. While one can rely on the senses to see what is happening, one needs to inquire from the actors as to what is the meaning of their acts for any explanations to take place. Let us take for an example the utter bewilderment of a complete outsider would face if taken to witness a cricket match. The meaningless actions of observably of adult men hitting a round object and running around for no practical purpose, and worse, thousands of spectators getting so emotionally charged at the sight of such meaningless act would not appear reasonable to any outside and observative observer. The observer may put forward the verdict of collective insanity if not made familiar with the meaning systems that prompt the actions, as well as large amount of conceptual data as to what is a game, why is it played, and what is the relationship between game and national pride, and so on and so forth. So it is with every act of observation of society what we need to refer to more generalized concept and also meaning systems of the actors. This is not to say that one relies only on explanations given by the actors, but to true explanations in the social sciences would then contextualize the observations, the meanings, and the actor's frame of reference to a large and more generalized system of concepts and relationships to try to get a true meaning true of explanations. Thus, inductive data is contextualized by a logical process or deduction. Social scientists have devised ways to make observations more meaningful, or as it is put, more scientific. To understand this a little better, we must go into the history of what constitutes data for the sociologist and anthropologist who have a society and culture as their object of society. As is evident, the nature of the data is itself sufficiently different from the data of natural sciences, as whatever we observe is an abstract. Did you know find the same to be the case when you carried out the reflection and action 1.1 and 1.2 exercise. Like when we observe a cricket match, the term game is a construct, and unless we use these constructs to explain whatever we are seeing physically, the entire observations would become meaningless. Thus, as Dan Speber 1982 has argued, there is only one way to describe cultural and social phenomena, and that is by interpretations. But even before we go into the problems of interpretations, we must be clear about what it is that we are going to interpret. In other words, what is the nature of observations on which we really rely on our base data. To begin with, social scientists interpret data or basic observation made by anyone. In the 18th century and 19th century, travelers, missionaries, and administrators collected data, large parts of data used. It is true that some of it is still forms the basis of much of social theory, especially those accounts that could never be duplicated, as the situations, societies, and cultures depicted in them have since disappeared. In the 19th century, the work was on a pure scientific methodology or on nomothetic generalizations. See in box 1.6, the nomothetic and ideographic explanations. Box 1.6, nomothetic and ideographic explanations. As Band Windelband 1914 said all explanations are of two types, nomethetic and ideographic. The former refers to generalized laws and the latter or to the individual facts. We may, for example, call the laws of evolutions nomethetic and the specific event of history ideographic. Since sociology seems to be a science of society, it aspires to a nomothetic range rather than ideographics. The attempt of the classical sociologists was thus to find the laws that make society run, and the assumption was that the society too has an observative existence like all natural objectives, and like all natural objectives also follows same case of principles. The assumptions of society as a natural phenomenon following laws of nature was to disassociate it from its earlier conceptualization as a divine entity following supernatural dictates. However, to make society an objective capable of being subjected to scientific analysis, another criterion of scientific analysis had to be fulfilled, namely of ethical neutrality. Society has its norms had for long been entrenched within religion and cosmology, so that most rulers of society were viewed as divine sanction rather than as a creation of humans, like the insects, taboos, norms of femininity and masculinity, etc. A science of society too has to be proceeded from basics that all rules and norms are variable and human made, and therefore a science of sanction. In other words, all aspects of society has a positive purposing existence than what then can be explained rationally. At this point, let us here remind ourselves, as the Turner 2000 pointed out, that study of society uses on the one hand formal theory with the assumptions, accepts propositions and laws, and in this sense is similar to natural science, and as much as such it exposes empirical data. In other words, casualty doesn't live in other words, the verse also aspect of society has purpose of existence that can be explained rationally. At this point, let us here remind ourselves about what Turner pointed out, that the study of society uses on the one hand formal theory with assumptions, concepts and propositions and laws, and in this sense is similar to natural science, and as such it explores empirical data, practices and institutions, and tries to find casual and generalizable as statement. For example, Rutan 1966 to 57-67, Braybrook, Hambell, Kierkegaard, McIntyre. On the other hand, many sociologists and philosophers, for example, Girtus, McLaren, Alsdain, Turner, Sahlin, have argued that given the diversity and multiplicity of social world, it is not possible to develop a generalizable and casual explanations. They they hold that social focus on observations of local actions and interaction between it to develop an analysis of various social contexts, irrespective of which perspective one accepts. Turner's 2002 2012 words, social theory thrives and survives best when it is engaged with empirical research and or on a public issues. As a matter of fact, even the 19th century sociologist who was killed by a critical agenda towards the social reality. For example, Auguste Comte was linked to programs of social action. 1.5 Logical understanding of society. The questions arise, what then is the legacy we have for logically understanding social reality? One is to carry on with the discussions of ideas of sociologists, like what we have done in this unit regarding Comte. They constructed their theories around an explanation of what they considered was new and unique in social reality. This exercise will take us to unimaginable details, and the unit will be extraordinarily long. So, ending here with the mind of Comte's ideas only, we will refer you to be alive and attractive to such extent discussions as and when they appear in subsequent units of book 1, and also in the on units of MSO 001, the course on sociological theories and concepts. At this point in our discussions, it may be suffice to say the important characteristic of scientific inquiry into social reality would include emphasis on relevant empirical social sources of data. The general line of demarcation between observation and theory, the focus of logical consistency and deductive coverage. For understanding social reality, for Elster and Little, say social science research needs to discover regularities derived from underlying causal properties of social phenomena. It is not necessary for us to draw an analogy between social science and natural sciences in order to stress the explanatory significance of discovering regularities in the social world. It is by now clearly understood that the social scientists cannot be evaluated the way natural sciences derive laws and from the protest physical phenomena. You may observe that social sciences are not inquiring scientific explanation in terms of what we call understand social cannot be emulated in science and derives law of properties and physical phenomena. You may say that the social sciences do not require hypotheses. Confirmed empirical data are parts of the nuts and bolts of social science research. Methodology, sociology, like any other social science, offers weak generalization which have only temporary predictability. What kind of generalizations of regularities are we talking about? A law of nature refers to a governing regularity, that is as a particular law of nature where there will be always generations of a particular kind of behavior. For example, it is a governing regularity that forces electrodynamics affect promotion protons and electrons. Phenomenal or phenomenological as labeled by Cartwright. Regularities are refers on the other hand to common features of social entities and their effects on individual agency. For clarifications on this point, see box number 1.7, examples of phenomenal regularity from Little. Box 1.7, examples of phenomenal regularity from Little. It has been observed, for example, that land tenuous systems with a particular structure creates common incentives for individuals wherever they are implemented. It is then a regularity of these systems that they have common features under investment in capital improvements. But these irregularities are strictly derivative from features of individual agency, and they do not represent governing regularities as a certain kind of social institutions. 1.6 conclusions. Since sociological reality is highly diverse and constantly experiencing cross-cutting varieties of causation, it is possible only to produce scientifically valid knowledge in terms of exemption-laden phenomenal regularities and the highly qualified regularities that derive from the institutional logic analysis. In methodological terms, in the social science that includes sociology, we need to be aware of the scope and limits of generalization possible in the light of nature of our subjective matter. Concluding this unit with the above note, we end at this point our debate over science in the context of methodologies of social science research. We shall continue the debate until in Unit 2 by discussing the theme of empirical approach, which social scientists are extensively in their research and on the basis claim their endeavor to be scientific. Further reading are there: Introducing Sociology, and the other one was Gideon's that is Social Theory and Modern Sociology, and by Aaron Raymond, Main Currents in Sociological Thought. Volumes and 2 are mentioned here. So this is the few references for the readings. Okay, then we can call it as the end of the unit 1, named Logic of Inquiry in Social Research.